Good morning, boys and girls. It's Monday, May the 11th, so I want to give a shout out to Peyton Tubb and Travis Harris. Love you guys. Also, let's look at our iReady for this past week. I'm going to talk about our people that made a 100 first. And Ava made a 100 this past week. Briley, Greer, Caitlin, Josie, Ariana, Harper, Cameron, Hunter, Saralyn, Kyler, and Olivia. So way to go, guys. Now let me tell you everybody that worked at least an hour. Ava did an hour and 15 minutes. Sam Boyd, an hour 28. Wyatt, 2 hours and 1 minute. Briley, 2 hours and 17 minutes. Greer, 1 hour and 34 minutes. Georgia, 1 hour and 47 minutes. Caitlin, 1 hour and 5 minutes. John Weston, 2 hours and 23 minutes. Josie, 2 hours and 11 minutes. Patrick, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Ariana, 1 hour and 9 minutes. Harper, 1 hour and 11 minutes. Cameron, 47 minutes. He almost did it. Hunter, 1 hour and 38 minutes. Jerry, 2 hours and 28 minutes. Saralyn, 2 hours and 21 minutes. And Olivia, 4 hours and 2 minutes, which is awesome. But we had an even higher than that. Our class time record was broken by Christian Gunter with 5 hours and 6 minutes. So way to go, Christian. You guys are doing much better in your iReady than you were at first. Okay, for AR, for this past week, actually for fourth quarter, let me just read everyone that has at least half of their goal. We actually only have starting today, about 2 weeks left of AR, so you should have more like 80% of your goal, but these people at least have half or more. Georgia has 65% of her goal at 100% correct. That's great, Georgia. Hunter has 55% of his goal at 79%. Jerry has already made his goal, but he's got 156% now of his goal at 95%. And then in my class, Wyatt, you're the only one. You have your goal. You have 103% of your goal at a 96% correct average. Now, I was looking at our yearly numbers this morning as well, and I'm going to give a special certificate to the one child in my homeroom and the one child in Miss Slider's homeroom that has the most points for the whole year. And I'm going to also give a certificate to the child in each class that has the highest percent correct average. So far, in Miss Slider's homeroom, Patrick Guthrie has 88 points so far this year, and he's got a good percent correct too at 88%. Hey, 88 and 88. In my homeroom right now, it is Wyatt Carter. He has 81.3 points and 93% correct average. So you guys work really hard. Right now, I'm not exactly sure who has the highest average in each class, but I see some pretty high ones here. So keep up the good work over the next 2 weeks. You can surpass both of these boys, or you can just see if you can beat your own record. That's even more important. Remember, you can test on Little House on the Prairie if you think you really heard all of it or most of it. And then you can test on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as well. And any book you read on Mayan. For those of you who don't have internet access, I understand that's impossible, but you can just read as much as possible, and that is still going to help you so much with your reading skills. Now we have a few Mayan stories that the kids said I could read. The only prerequisite for the writing was that your setting needed to be summer and your two characters needed to be a dog and a cat. Here is John Weston's The Adventures of a Feline and a Canine. On a hot summer day, a cat named Fluffy was roaming around looking for food. Fluffy wasn't fluffy with hair, but he was mighty round in the belly. He was really cranky because he was hungry and tired, which matched his hair color red. While he was roaming looking for food, he met a dog named Shredder. Shredder was very dirty. He looked hungry and tired too. Shredder was very large and looked like a wolf. At first, Fluffy was scared of him, but then they became friends. Shredder wasn't cranky like Fluffy. He was very cheerful and liked to run around. As Fluffy and Shredder were roaming, they found a city. They didn't know exactly where they were, but all they knew was the sky was getting dark and no one was outside playing. Before they knew it, it got really windy. Things started flying everywhere and they were scared. They were scooped up by a big windstorm that moved around. They were yelling for help. They didn't know what was going on. They kept yelling, help, help, help. Finally, the wind put them down and they were so dizzy from all the spinning. They barely could walk. So Fluffy and Shredder laid on the ground for a while to rest. When they finally could stand, they stood up and looked around. Everything was a mess. They tried to move limbs, but they were too big for them to pick up. A little boy saw Fluffy and Shredder outside his window. He ran to his parents and told them there was a cat and dog outside. They all went outside to look and see what the little boy was talking about. They realized that Fluffy and Shredder didn't have owners. The little boy fell in love with Fluffy and Shredder. Fluffy and Shredder were so happy to finally have a family. They never went hungry again. That's good, and you could see a really good problem and solution in John Weston's writing as well. Okay, here's Josie's. The bake sale. One summer day, there was a dog and a cat that wanted to do a bake sale to raise money for the annual summer camp. When they realized that they were both doing a bake sale, they started to rival against each other to see who could get the most money for the summer camp. They started to sabotage each other and prank each other. But once they pranked the bake sales, no one wanted to eat either of them or buy from either of them. So they realized they should work together, not against each other. So they started to work together and made enough money to go to the annual summer camp, and after that, they became friends. Very good. And I see a problem and solution there as well. Okay, here is Jerry's writing. The Arguing Artist. It was summer in New Pet City. There were two famous artists. Mrs. Fluffy was one of them, and Mr. Bark was the second one. They always fought over who was the better artist. One day they asked Frida Kahlo who was the better painter, and she said, Jerry. They were both sad, but then they had a party, an art party. That was very cute, and Jerry also used a person from history. I looked up Frida Kahlo because I really didn't know who she was, and she was a famous Mexican painter herself back in the early 1900s. So that's a cool way to plant some history in with your story, Jerry. Okay, here is Briley's. It's called Ollie and Allie. On a bright summer day, a dog named Ollie was trying to take a nap. He was almost asleep when he heard the scratching sound. He looked up mysteriously. Ollie found his sister, Allie. She was playing on their scratching post they got for Easter. Ollie tried to ignore the sound. He realized that all that scratching helped him go to sleep faster. Ollie and Allie were happy after all. Very good, guys. You didn't have to do a problem and solution, but each one of you did, and so I'm so thankful for that. Very good stories. There were some other really good ones, too. They just didn't say I could read them. And your writing for this coming week, oh yes, let me talk to you about that for just a minute before we get into our book. The writing for this week is we're studying a theme and stories, like the lesson you can learn for something. So what I want you to write about is write a story that demonstrates this theme, that being honest, even when it's difficult, will pay off in the end. What that means is being honest will always have good results eventually, even if not right at the moment. Sometimes you do get in trouble when you are honest, but then good things can happen later. The vocabulary lessons, I believe there was one called Theme and Stories. I did the current week again so you could, know what's going on in the current events. And then there's one, there is a vocabulary video also about vocabulary, sorry. Okay, guys, now we are going to read chapter 6 and 7 today, Into the Forest. I want you to listen for these things here. How did the children find out that Edmund had really been in Narnia? Number 2, what happened to Mr. Tumnus the Fawn? Number 3, what did they follow to Mr. Beaver? There was another kind of animal they followed to get to Mr. Beaver. Number 4, what did Mr. Beaver have that made him know that he was a friend and not an enemy? Number 5, what is one food they had for dinner with the beavers? If you'll notice, a new character, Mogren, is going to be introduced, and we'll see quite a bit about Aslan in these 2 chapters as well. So the 2 chapters are Into the Forest and A Day with the Beavers, 6 and 7. I wish the Macready would hurry up and take all these people away, said Susan presently. I'm getting horribly cramped. And what a filthy smell of camphor, said Edmund. I expect the pockets of these coats are full of it, said Susan, to keep away moths. There's something sticking into my back, said Peter. And isn't it cold, said Susan. Now that you mention it, it is cold, said Peter. And hang it all, it's wet too. What's the matter with this place? I'm sitting on something wet. It's getting wetter every minute. He struggled to his feet. Let's get out, said Edmund. They've gone. Ooh, said Susan suddenly, and everyone asked her what was the matter. I'm sitting against a tree, said Susan, and look, it's getting light over there. By Jove, you're right, said Peter, and look there and there. It's trees all around, and this wet stuff is snow. Why, I do believe we've got into Lucy's wood after all. And now there was no mistaking it, and all 4 children stood blinking in the daylight of a winter day. Behind them were coats hanging on pegs. In front of them were snow-covered trees. Peter turned at once to Lucy. I apologize for not believing you, he said. I'm sorry. Will you shake hands? Of course, said Lucy, and she did.